Welcome back to the channel. If you've ever been blamed at work for something you didn't do, tell me in the comments what happened. And don't forget to like and subscribe if stories like this matter to you. I never thought I would become the scapegoat. I had been at the company for years. I followed rules. I documented my work. I kept my head down and did my job the right way. Then one project went wrong. Not because of me, but because of a rushed decision made above my level. That didn't matter. My manager called a meeting and said my name out loud. He said I missed something. He said I didn't follow process. He said the mistake was mine. No warning. No questions. Just blame. HR was already there. Notes were being taken. My boss sat at the end of the table and said nothing. That silence felt worse than the accusation. I tried to explain. I showed emails. I pointed to approvals. My manager cut me off and said, "Let's not argue." After the meeting, my access was limited. Files disappeared from my dashboard. People stopped making eye contact. By the end of the day, I understood something. This wasn't about fixing a problem. This was about protecting someone else. And somehow, that someone wasn't me. I went home that night with a sick feeling in my chest, not knowing that HR was about to open the wrong file. And that one mistake would change everything. The next morning, my badge still worked, but barely. Some systems let me in. Others didn't. Messages failed to load. Files I used every day were suddenly restricted. No one explained why. My manager walked past my desk and didn't stop. He didn't look angry. He looked calm. Too calm. Like the problem had already been handled. HR sent me a short email. Please cooperate fully with the review process. No details. No timeline. In meetings, my name came up less and less. When it did, people spoke carefully. Like I was fragile. Or dangerous. I asked my manager what was happening. He smiled and said, "Just routine." Routine didn't feel like this. That afternoon, a coworker leaned over and whispered, "Be careful. They're building a story." I asked what he meant. He shook his head. "Just be careful." At home, I reread every email tied to the project. Every approval. Every decision. The proof was there. But something scared me. If the proof existed, why was I still the one being blamed? That's when I realized the review wasn't about facts. It was about speed. They needed a name. And mine was already written down. 2 days later, HR called me into a small conference room. No windows. No coffee. Just folders. They asked me to walk through the project step by step. I stayed calm. I told the truth. I showed documentation. One HR analyst typed quickly, nodding as I spoke. Then she paused. She frowned at her screen and clicked again. Her face changed slightly. Not shock. Confusion. "Just a moment," she said. She opened another file. I didn't know it then, but she had clicked the wrong name. Her eyes moved fast as she scrolled. She stopped typing. My manager, who had been sitting back comfortably, leaned forward. "Is there a problem?" The analyst didn't answer right away. She said, "This approval timeline doesn't match." The room went quiet. My boss looked up for the first time. "What file are you in?" he asked. The analyst swallowed. "Compliance history." No one spoke. My manager's smile disappeared. And in that silence, I felt something shift. For the first time since the blame started, I wasn't the one being watched. The wrong file was open. And it wasn't about me anymore. The HR analyst cleared her throat and closed the file too quickly. "I'll need to verify something," she said. My manager leaned back again, but his hands were tight on the table. "This review is about her," he said, pointing at me. "Let's stay focused." HR nodded, but the mood had changed. My boss finally spoke. "What didn't match?" he asked. The analyst hesitated. "The approval dates," she said carefully. "They show a different decision path than what was described." My manager laughed once. A short, sharp sound. "Old records are messy," he said. "That's why we're here." No one laughed with him. HR ended the meeting early. Too early. She said they needed time to cross-check documentation. She asked my manager to send follow-up emails. As we walked out, he leaned close to me and whispered, "Don't get your hopes up." I didn't reply. Back at my desk, I noticed something strange. My access didn't get worse. It stopped changing. No more restrictions. No new warnings. At lunch, I saw HR printing documents. Thick ones. For the first time since this started, I felt something new. Not relief. Suspicion. Because when people rush to close a file, it usually means they opened something they weren't ready to see. And I had a feeling they wouldn't be able to close it again. The next morning, my manager wasn't in his office. That never happened. Meetings were delayed. Emails went unanswered. People checked calendars like something was missing. HR sent a message asking me to be available. No meeting title. No names listed. When I arrived, legal was there. That made my stomach drop. The HR analyst from before looked nervous. She explained that during the review, an internal compliance file had been accessed by mistake. By mistake, she said again, like it mattered. Legal asked one question. Was it altered? HR shook her head. No, but it shows override activity. Override. My boss closed his notebook slowly. By whom? HR said my manager's name. The room went silent. Legal asked me if I had ever been instructed to bypass process. I told the truth. Yes, I said. More than once. They wrote that down. No one accused me of anything. No one defended my manager. The meeting ended without decisions, but something was clear. I wasn't the problem anymore. I walked back to my desk knowing one thing. The wrong file hadn't just cleared my name. It had changed who this investigation was really about. By the end of that week, everything felt unstable. My manager still hadn't returned. His calendar was blocked out with meetings marked private. When people asked questions, no one answered clearly. HR sent another message. This time, it asked me to forward any emails where I was told to move faster or skip steps. I didn't have to search long. I sent them everything. Late-night messages. Short approvals. Just get it done replies. Each one felt heavier than the last. An hour later, HR replied with one sentence. Thank you for your cooperation. No smile. No reassurance. At work, my access was fully restored. Quietly. No announcement. No apology. Coworkers noticed. One pulled me aside and whispered, they're asking about old projects. Another said, legal is involved now. That word followed me all day. Legal. By afternoon, my boss called a meeting. Just him and me. He looked tired. He said, this has gotten bigger than expected. I didn't say anything. He continued, HR is reviewing decisions made over several years. Several years. Then he said something that made my stomach turn. We may need you to explain how things really worked. For the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. And I understood something important. The Scapegoat story was falling apart. And now they needed the truth. The next meeting included legal, HR, and someone I'd never seen before. Compliance. That alone told me how serious this had become. They asked me to describe my role, not on paper, but in real life. What I approved. What I questioned. What I was told to ignore. I spoke slowly and clearly. Every time I hesitated, they waited. No one rushed me. That felt strange. Compliance asked, did you ever raise concerns? Yes, I said. What happened? I was told not to slow things down. They wrote that down. Then they asked, were any records changed after decisions were made? I paused. I saw edits, I said carefully. After problems appeared. No one reacted. They already knew. That's when my boss went silent. He didn't interrupt. He didn't defend my manager. He stared at the table like he was seeing it for the first time. Compliance closed her folder. This is no longer a performance review, she said. It's a risk assessment. Risk. That word hung in the air. When the meeting ended, HR told me I was cleared of wrongdoing. They said it formally. Out loud. I walked back to my desk feeling lighter, but also shaken. Because if I was cleared so easily, it meant someone else wasn't. And the silence from my boss told me exactly who that was. The clearance email came before lunch. It was short and careful. After review, no policy violations were found on your part. No apology. No explanation. Just a line that changed everything. My manager's name was not mentioned. But everyone felt it. People started asking me questions again. Real ones. The kind they stopped asking when I became the problem. My boss called a team meeting that afternoon. He spoke slowly. He said leadership was reviewing internal processes. He said cooperation was expected. He didn't look at me once. After the meeting, HR stopped by my desk. Please don't discuss the review, they said. I nodded. An hour later, compliance emailed me directly. They wanted timelines. Old projects. Decisions that felt rushed. Years of them. That night, I stayed late. Not to fix anything. To remember. I wrote everything down. Dates. Names. Meetings. Words that were said. I realized how often I had protected the company by staying quiet. And how easy it was for that silence to be used against me. As I shut down my computer, I noticed something strange. My manager's desk was empty. No bag. No jacket. No notes. Just a chair pushed in neatly. I didn't feel relief. I felt the weight of what was coming next. Because once compliance starts asking about patterns, not people, they don't stop. The next morning, my boss asked me to come to his office. The door was already closed. He didn't sit behind his desk. He stood by the window, hands in his pockets. I need to ask you something, he said. I waited. How long have you been covering for him? The question hit harder than the accusation ever did. I wasn't covering, I said. I was following instructions. He nodded slowly. That's what compliance thinks too. He finally looked at me. They found discrepancies going back years. Years. He sighed. HR opening that file was unfortunate. Unfortunate. I almost smiled. He asked if I would stay available for more questions. I said yes. As I stood to leave, he said one last thing. You didn't do anything wrong. I paused. Then why was I blamed? He didn't answer. That silence said more than words ever could. At my desk, an email popped up marked urgent. Legal. Subject line, next steps. My hands went cold. Because now this wasn't about blame. It was about liability. And the wrong file had opened a door no one could close again. The email from legal was short. Too short. It asked me to attend a meeting the next morning. No details. Just time, place, and a reminder to be truthful. I barely slept that night. At work, my manager's name was removed from shared documents. His approvals vanished from workflows. Tasks were reassigned without comment. No announcement. No goodbye. In the meeting room, legal and compliance were already seated. HR joined last and closed the door. They asked about one specific decision. Then another. Then another. Each one traced back to the same pattern. Shortcuts. Overrides. Pressure to move fast. I showed emails. I explained calls that were never recorded. I pointed to approvals that came after the fact. Legal stopped me at one point. This aligns with what we're seeing. That sentence stayed with me. By the end, they thanked me. Thanked me. As I left, I noticed something else. My access badge worked everywhere again. Fully restored. For the first time since this started, I wasn't being watched. I was being relied on. And that told me the story had completely flipped. The fallout spread quietly. Meetings changed tone. Leaders spoke carefully. Words like risk and exposure replaced performance and mistake. My manager's desk stayed empty. HR called me in one last time. They told me my record was clean. Fully cleared. Then they said something unexpected. We're reviewing how this happened. Not who. How. They asked if I wanted to transfer teams. Or take time off. Or speak to someone. I declined. I didn't need distance. I needed closure. At my desk, coworkers treated me differently now. With respect. With caution. Like they finally understood. That afternoon, my boss sent a company-wide email. It said leadership changes were coming. No names. No reasons. Just direction. As I read it, I felt something subtle. The scapegoat role was gone. The wrong file had done what years of silence never could. It forced the truth into the open. And now, the company wasn't asking who failed. They were asking who had been protected. And why. The silence that followed wasn't confusion anymore. It was accountability starting to speak. By the next week, the investigation felt official. Calendars were blocked. Meetings were labeled mandatory. People spoke in lower voices. Even emails sounded careful. Compliance asked me to review a timeline they had built. It stretched back farther than I expected. Projects I barely remembered. Decisions that felt small at the time. But lined up together, they told a story. A story of rushed approvals. Of warnings ignored. Of fixes made quietly after problems appeared. I saw my name there often. Not as the decision maker. As the one who cleaned things up. Compliance looked at me and said, "You prevented worse outcomes." I didn't know how to respond. That afternoon, my boss called another meeting. This time, he named the problem. "We relied too much on informal processes," he said. "That stops now." He didn't say my manager's name. He didn't need to. Everyone knew. As the meeting ended, I realized something important. The company wasn't just fixing a mistake. It was rewriting how power worked. And that only happens when the wrong file forces the right questions. The official notice came the next morning. My manager was placed on leave. No farewell. No explanation. Just a system update and a locked calendar. People whispered, but no one defended him. HR met with me privately. They thanked me again for cooperating. Then they said something that surprised me. "You were never supposed to carry that much responsibility alone." I thought about all the nights I stayed late. All the times I fixed things quietly so no one else had to answer for them. I nodded. They asked if I wanted a formal apology added to my record. I said no. I didn't need words. I needed change. Later that day, my boss stopped by my desk. He looked tired, but calmer. "We should have listened to you earlier," he said. I believed him. As he walked away, I felt something I hadn't felt since this started. Relief. Not because someone else fell, but because the truth finally stood on its own. The wrong file didn't just clear my name. It exposed a system that needed to change. And for the first time, I wasn't standing alone in it anymore. The changes started quietly, but they spread fast. New approval rules were announced. Decisions that once happened in hallway talks now needed written sign-off. Compliance was added to meetings where it had never been before. People were nervous. I noticed managers double-checking emails before sending them. Words like urgent and just do it disappeared. HR asked me to review a draft of the new process. Not to approve it, just to comment. That alone felt strange. For years, my input was ignored. Now they wanted it in writing. I read the draft carefully. It fixed many of the gaps that caused the problem. The kind of gaps my manager used to push blame downward. When I sent my feedback, HR replied within minutes. "Thank you. This is exactly what we needed." At lunch, a coworker said, "Things are different now." She was right. The office felt heavier, but safer. That afternoon, I saw my boss in a meeting with legal. The door stayed closed. For the first time, I understood something. The wrong file hadn't just exposed one person. It had exposed how fragile the system really was. And now everyone was adjusting to that truth. A week later, my boss asked me to meet him again. This time, his tone was careful. "I want to apologize," he said. "Not just for what happened, but for how quickly we accepted the wrong story." I listened. He explained that the company was reviewing leadership decisions across teams. Not just one department. Trust was misplaced, he said. I nodded. He asked if I wanted to move into a new role. One with clearer authority. Proper backing. I didn't answer right away. Part of me was tired. Part of me was cautious. "I need time," I said. He respected that. As I left his office, I realized something important. This wasn't about promotion or punishment anymore. It was about accountability. The silence that followed the wrong file had done more than any argument ever could. It forced people to slow down, to look closely, to accept responsibility. And for the first time since this started, I felt safe enough to think about my future. Not as a scapegoat, but as someone whose voice finally mattered. The investigation moved into its final phase. Compliance stopped asking questions. Legal stopped scheduling interviews. That was how I knew decisions were being made. Rumors spread fast. Some said my manager would never return. Others said leadership was protecting the company, not people. I stayed focused on my work. One afternoon, HR asked me to attend a meeting labeled resolution. That word made my chest tighten. Inside the room were senior leaders I had only seen on company announcements. No laptops. No small talk. Legal spoke first. Based on our findings, corrective action has been taken. They didn't say names, but everyone knew. Then HR turned to me. We want to acknowledge that you were wrongly blamed. Hearing it out loud felt unreal. They offered a written statement for my records. They offered support. They offered options. I accepted the statement. Not for revenge. For truth. As the meeting ended, one leader said, "Thank you for holding the line." I walked out knowing something had shifted permanently. Not just for me. For the company. The announcement went out the next morning. It was brief. A leadership transition. A focus on compliance. A commitment to transparency. No details. But the silence around one name said everything. Coworkers stopped whispering. People worked more carefully now. Like they understood the cost of shortcuts. My boss stopped by my desk later that day. "You were right," he said simply. I believed him. He asked if I would help train the new manager. Someone outside the old circle. I agreed. Not because I owed them, but because I wanted things to be different. As I walked home that evening, I thought about how close I came to being pushed out quietly. How easily the wrong story almost became the final one. If HR hadn't opened the wrong file, none of this would have happened. I would still be the scapegoat. And the truth would still be buried. That thought stayed with me. Because sometimes justice doesn't arrive loudly. It arrives by accident. And once it does, there's no pretending it didn't. The new manager started the following week. She was different right away. She asked questions. She took notes. She didn't rush decisions or assign blame. On her first day, she asked to meet me. "I've read the files," she said. "All of them." That caught my attention. She told me she wanted to understand how work really flowed, not just how it looked on paper. She asked where pressure came from, where mistakes usually started. I answered honestly. I didn't protect anyone. I didn't attack anyone. I just told the truth. She listened. Later that day, she sent a message to the team. Clear expectations. Clear boundaries. No shortcuts. People responded fast. For the first time, deadlines felt real but fair. That evening, I sat at my desk longer than usual. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to finish something cleanly. As I shut down my computer, I realized something had changed inside me. I wasn't waiting for the next accusation. I wasn't bracing for blame. I felt steady. But I also knew this story wasn't finished yet. Because accountability doesn't stop with one person. It keeps moving upward. 2 weeks later, HR asked to meet one last time. They said legal had completed its review. Final decisions were made. Documentation was closed. Then they told me something unexpected. The issue hadn't stopped with my manager. During the review, they found other cases. Smaller ones. Similar patterns. Different teams. Nothing criminal. But risky. Very risky. Leadership had approved a wider compliance reset. Training. Oversight. Real consequences. HR thanked me again for speaking honestly when it mattered. They said my cooperation helped prevent larger problems. I asked one question. Was I chosen because I was easy to blame? HR didn't dodge it. Yes, they said. At first. That answer hurt. But it also gave me clarity. They told me the company would cover legal fees if I ever needed counsel related to the incident. A quiet admission of fault. As I left the room, I felt something close to relief. Not because I won, but because the truth was finally written down, and no one could erase it again. Life at work slowly returned to normal. But it wasn't the same normal as before. Meetings started on time. Decisions were written down. Approvals were clear. No one asked for favors off the record anymore. I noticed people pausing before sending emails, reading twice, choosing words carefully. That told me everything. One afternoon, compliance sent out a company-wide update. New controls, new reporting paths, new consequences for bypassing rules. It wasn't dramatic, but it was serious. My boss called me later that day. He thanked me again, then said something unexpected. "You saved us from something much worse." I didn't know how to respond. He explained that regulators had recently fined companies for similar issues. If this had gone unnoticed, the damage could have been massive. Fines, lawsuits, public reports. I realized then how close the company had come to real trouble. All because shortcuts felt easier. All because blame felt safer than truth. As I logged off that evening, I felt proud, but also cautious. Because systems don't break overnight. They crack slowly. And someone always pays the price first. This time, it just wasn't me. A month later, HR asked if I would speak during a training session. Not to tell my story in detail, but to explain why process matters. I agreed. Standing in front of the room felt strange. I wasn't used to being seen that way. I talked about documentation, about speaking up early, about how silence can turn into risk. No names, no drama, just lessons. Afterward, several people thanked me quietly. One said, "I didn't realize how fast things can go wrong." Neither did I. Later that week, my boss shared news. The company had passed its internal audit with no major findings. That was rare. He said leadership had learned a hard lesson. I thought about the wrong file. The quiet click that changed everything. How close I came to walking away blamed and broken. If that file had stayed closed, none of this would exist. No reset. No accountability. No truth. As I left the building that day, I felt something settle inside me. I wasn't just cleared. I was heard. And that made all the difference. The final confirmation came quietly. HR sent an email marked closed. That was it. No meeting. No follow-up. Just one word that meant everything was finished. I read it twice. The case was officially closed. Findings documented. Actions taken. I sat back and let out a slow breath. For weeks, my life had felt like it was under a microscope. Every email, every meeting, every pause felt heavy. Now, the pressure was gone. Later that day, my boss stopped by my desk. He didn't sit down. "I wanted you to hear this from me," he said. The board reviewed the report. That caught my attention. He told me they were concerned, not just about one manager, but about how easily blame was misplaced. About how fast leadership accepted a simple answer. They weren't happy, he said. I nodded. He thanked me again. Not as a formality, but as a person. When he walked away, I realized something important. The board never spoke to me directly. They didn't need to. The files spoke for me. And once the truth was written clearly, no one could ignore it again. The ripple effects showed up in small ways. Budgets were reviewed more closely. Projects moved slower, but safer. People asked questions instead of making assumptions. I noticed my name in meeting notes again. Not as a problem, but as a contributor. That mattered. One afternoon, a junior coworker came to my desk. She looked nervous. I heard what happened, she said quietly. How did you stay calm? I thought for a moment. I trusted the facts, I said. Even when others didn't. She nodded like she was storing that away. Before leaving that day, I opened my old emails one last time. The ones from the early days of the blame. They looked different now. Smaller. Weaker. Because the truth had outgrown them. As I shut down my computer, I felt proud, but also aware. This story wasn't special because of revenge or punishment. It mattered because one mistake exposed a system that needed fixing. HR opened the wrong file. But for once, the wrong move led to the right outcome. And my boss's silence? That was the sound of the truth finally being heard. A few weeks later, I was asked to review a new policy draft. Not just comment on it. Approve it. The document covered reporting paths, compliance checks, and protection against blame shifting. The exact things that failed me before. I read every page slowly. This wasn't about power. It was about trust. When I sent my approval, HR replied with one line. This will be implemented company-wide. That moment stayed with me. Not because I felt important, but because something that once hurt me was now being used to protect others. Later that day, I ran into my boss near the elevators. He looked lighter than before. We learned the hard way, he said. Silence can be expensive. I nodded. As I walked out of the building, I thought about how close I came to leaving quietly. How easy it would have been to accept blame and disappear. If HR hadn't opened the wrong file, none of this would exist. No change. No truth. No record. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive as an apology. It arrives as a policy. And that felt like progress. Today, my job feels different. Not because the work changed, but because the fear is gone. I speak freely now. I document everything. And when something feels wrong, I say it early. People listen. That didn't happen because I fought louder. It happened because the truth was written down and seen by the right eyes. I still think about that moment when HR opened the wrong file. One click. One mistake. And everything shifted. If you're watching this and you're being blamed for something you didn't do, I want you to hear this. Facts matter. Documentation matters. And silence helps the wrong people most. You don't need revenge. You need the truth to exist where it can't be erased. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop. And remember, sometimes the wrong file opens the right door.